old Nintendo gamer.
And son.
Bit of a Zelda retrospective here. Now, we're not going to go through the good, the bad, and the Philips CDI. We're not going to go through, we're going to go through the main games, basically. What's our take on them? So, those CDI games, the Link, the Faces of Evil, and Zelda, the Wand of Gamelon, the kind of spin-off games we're forgetting, freshly picked Tingles, Rosy Rupee Land, we're not going to be talking about those. None of the Hyrule Warriors games or Cadence of Hyrule, Picross, Twilight, Princess, and nothing that Link just appeared in, like Soul Calibur 2 as a cameo, Smash or Mario Kart 8. The main Zelda games. Starting in 1986, because this year is the 35th anniversary, the February, that is, of this game, The Legend of Zelda on the NES. Do you have any nostalgia with this, Nick?
Not before the Wii. So that the Wii was the first place that I played it, to be honest. Or possibly even the GameCube on that collector's disc. I can't remember if I had that or not. I think I did. But the Wii. I think I got through half the game on the Wii and then gave up.
I remember playing on the NES. I don't think I ever owned it.
No.
But I certainly remember playing it back then. And it must have been late 80s, early 90s. So I'm 11, 12, that kind of age. And it's one of those games, like when you play Mario and you work your way through Mario, it's got a progression to it. This kind of Legend of Zelda, I didn't understand it, and you go from one screen and there's too many enemies and they're really accurate, and you lose that sword shooting ability and you're going to die very quickly. So in my kind of history with games, I want to clear all the enemies off in the screen, but doing that, you're not going to last long throughout the game. So I never, ever saw anything very much of The Legend of Zelda, and that's put me off it forever. I've never gone back to it. I have gone back to it, I tell a lie, but I've never gone more than 20 minutes into it and gone, this isn't for me. Greg, the first ever Zelda.
Yeah, it would have been the GameCube that I would have played it on first in that collector's edition. And yeah, pretty similar to you. I'm not even sure if I made it to 20 minutes, but I definitely tried it a couple of times and would maybe go a certain direction and kill a few enemies and then ultimately die and be back to the start, and then maybe either try and go that way again and see if I can get a wee bit further, or try a different direction, ultimately die again. It's just like, I'm not really feeling this, so just never went with it. And I don't think I ever could get into it, really.
Yeah, I never understood the end goal, it just felt like I was going into a screen, killing everything and then dying, yeah. And that was Zelda to me. Then moving on to the next year, it was the very next year, 1987, couple of months after, the Adventure of Link came. That's Zelda 2 on the NES as well. I didn't bond with this one either, Nick. How about you?
I did. I actually prefer this to the original. I think what made me like the original was Hyrule Warriors on the GameCube, when you had the sort of the adventure map, and you basically, that told you where all the secrets are in the original game. Like, you would have to like burn a tree or something, or put a bomb somewhere, which in the original game wasn't clear at all. Like, you would really have to really search in that game to find all that stuff. But Adventure of Link, I really like the side-scrolling combat. I think there's a lot of sort of tactical nuance to it. The 2D games, I think one of the worst things about them is the sort of attacking with the sword. It's much better in 3D. I don't like, especially in Link to the Past, which I'll talk about shortly. The sword play is not great in it, but in Adventure of Link, it's really, really good. Ducking and using the shield and dodging and stuff like that. I've got Again, I haven't finished this game, but I've got, I think, 3 or 4 dungeons into it. And it gets too hard for me. Like, I wouldn't be able to finish it, I think, without a guide. So, but it's good. Like, the dungeons are great. Like, the overworld's a bit dull, to be honest. It doesn't feel anywhere near as good as the original. But it is mainly a side scroller, I would say, this game. And I think it still stands out as something really, really unique in the Zelda series. And I think it's great in its own rights, on its own merits as well, especially the 2D dungeons.
Any thoughts about Zelda 2, Greg?
It's pretty much a similar story, just to the first game there. Like, I would have tried it on the GameCube, and maybe went through like the first couple of screens, went to the overhead, the zoomed out overhead view, went into a different village, maybe talked to a couple of people, and pretty much bowed out from there. Just, again, wasn't really liking it. I think I probably tried it again on the 3DS ambassador scheme thing, but again, just
it was on part of the ambassador scheme. Yes.
Yeah, it's one of them things, like, if I had nothing else to play and I could sit down and actually properly get absorbed in it for a while, maybe I would start seeing the merits of it. But when you have so many, like, other games to play, it's like, nah, I just don't have time for this here. No need.
Yeah, I never had this is another game on the NES that I don't know if I didn't own it, most certainly, but I certainly played it back when, not 1987, but probably the early 1990s. However, maybe I borrowed it off a mate or whatever, I can't quite remember. But yeah, as soon as you hit those 2D side-scrolling parts, you just got my ass. I'm too impatient as a kid, and it's just trying to hack and slash, and that's not the way to go about it. But you're right, if you got the time and the nuance and to know what you're doing and to learn the combat, yeah, I can see the potential in it. I've never played it properly. That's my problem. Because it's the next game that came 4 years later in 1991 when the SNES was out. That made me a gamer. I've always said it. It turned me onto gaming. It's a link to the past. The opening is just mesmeric. The rain, the lightning coming in, the way the game pushes you to certain locations without actually telling you where to go by locking off areas. For example, it's got that rainy sky. You can't go here. You can't go here. You can't get into the castle. The only way you can go is up that side path to the castle, and there's a bush there, and it's highlighted around that something is there. It's just, and the whole game, well, not the whole game, but the vast majority of the game does that. Rewards exploration, but doesn't make it too demanding like the first in the series. And ever since playing that opening section, I could just play that opening section many times, you're finding your uncle dead in the pathway after. Brilliant game. Nick, you are working your way through it.
Yeah, I just, I've got quite a few SNES games finished. I've done Super Mario World. I've done both the first 2 Donkey Kong games, Mario Kart. And I just thought, I might as well try Zelda as well and start that. And yeah, I don't remember the beginning of the game going by so quickly because it was well under 2 hours that I'd finished all 3 dungeons. And as a kid, obviously, that took a lot longer. But I mean, I already know where to go and stuff like that. I played this game first at a friend's house. A friend of my parents. They had 3 doors, and one of them had this on the SNES. And I don't really remember much about that. It must have been not long after it came out, but I remember having a lot of fun. And then I think it was like 95 or 96 I ended up getting this second hand, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I think it sort of gave the structure to Zelda games, didn't it? How they should work with the sort of the 2 main sort of parts. Part 1, get the Master Sword, and then part 2 when you're going for the Triforce. And yeah, the exploration, there's a number of secrets that are hidden, the heart pieces as well that you have to get, collecting all the different weapons, and the music, the graphics, everything about it. This is one of my favourite games of all time. Definitely the best 2D Zelda, and just an absolutely wonderful experience that I can play again and again and again. But yeah, like I mentioned before, the combat I've been struggling with it actually playing this time. Trying to line up the enemies perfectly, or when you have like 3 or 4 enemies on you at once, and they all just like attack you at the same time. It can be quite difficult, but luckily the other weapons that you have in this game are really, really useful. So you don't really need to use the sword that much, I would say. But yeah, I would love to play a 3D version of this or something. I know Link Between Worlds came out, but I wasn't too keen on that. I would prefer to see a full 3D version of this one.
It was strange coming back to A Link to the Past after playing A Link Between Worlds, because I played A Link to the Past quite a few times, and playing Link Between Worlds and getting used to that kind of mechanics, that he does control very, very differently. he's far more fluid and everything. And then when you come back to A Link to the Past, he is
a little bit more rigid, isn't it?
Yeah, he is more rigid, and especially with the combat, like you said, the combat is very rigid. But it also makes the combat like I know exactly where I need to hit, and I got to position myself into there, and I got to get in this angle. This enemy's got a shield in his left arm. I got to get to the right, and I got to hit them this way. A Link Between Worlds was more free form in its kind of combat, I believe. Greg, what were your thoughts on A Link to the Past?
Well, my first experience was probably very different. I think he's pretty much hit the nail on the head in terms of the combat there, and why top-down Zeldas generally don't really do it for me, is that sort of like restricted combat. Like even like in A Link to the Past, you can't hit people like diagonally. You have to be like side on or below them or whatever. I never really appreciated that, but when I first played the game, I was actually borrowing it off a friend at primary school. And up until that point, like I'd only really played like platforming games, like, or maybe racing or sports games or whatever, and that was like on my Super Nintendo or like on my friend's Mega Drive. So I'd never really played anything like open-ended or anything before. So when I first played it, I didn't really know what I was doing. And part of the problem was that there's obviously like 3 save files in the game, and my friend had 3 already started save files, and like I couldn't delete any of them. So anytime I was starting the game up and I was like, I have no idea where I'm supposed to be going. So I'd maybe run about a bit and kill a few enemies, and maybe go into like areas that I wasn't equipped for yet or anything, and just ultimately didn't really know what I was doing, and could probably have done with like starting from the beginning to to at least help me see what I was supposed to be doing. But I never really got to do that until I think it would have been I got the Game Boy Advance version, which again I started from the beginning and played it for a bit, and probably got up as far as like the Dark World and sort of bowed out there because I wasn't really enjoying it that much. So it wasn't until like the Wii Virtual Console that I eventually actually did go through and beat the game entirely. I gotta be honest, like I didn't really have the best time with it. Like I was okay. Like I have that wee like tinge of nostalgia because I did play it when I was younger, like from borrowing it from a friend, but I didn't have a hugely great experience with it at that time. So I don't know. Like I think after a few times, like I said earlier, when you get to the Dark World, it kind of falls apart for me a wee bit. But ultimately, I think it was when you get to like maybe like 5th or 6th dungeon or something. It's like it's an icy sort of place. Like I think I died quite often in it, and I just got extremely frustrated. And I was actually glad when the game finished. I just couldn't be bothered with it anymore.
Link to the Past slammed. It sounds like my experience with the first game. You know, it just didn't click with you in the beginning, and then you just don't want to go back to it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give us a like if you've enjoyed our content. You can also check out our other great content on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the N-E Café podcast from all good podcast providers. Just follow the links in the description below.